one thing that I tell them is, look, you were born healthy, and I am living proof if you were born healthy, you do not have to live sick. So we're going to start teasing it out right now. This is a marathon. The first 40-something years may have been rough, but the next 50 years are going to be much better. One day at a time, we're going to start teasing this out.
Welcome back to another episode of the Smarter Not Harder podcast, your home for 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. I'm your host again today. My name is Dr. Scott Scher, and it's a pleasure to be back with all of you. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was a fantastic podcast to record with Dani Williamson. She's a nurse practitioner in Tennessee who is just a phenomenal human, and we just had so much fun during this conversation. I can't wait to share it with you. So here's a little bio of Dani. So she's a family nurse practitioner who incorporates the art of medicine by balancing traditional and integrative therapies. She encourages her patients to step out of the realm of normal and reach optimal health. Dani owns Integrative Family Medicine and Wild and Well, a wellness emporium in Franklin, Tennessee. So this is her practice along with the supplement store that she also runs. She has a thriving practice focusing on whole body health. Her approach embodies a physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual approach to healing. She believes that God designed our bodies to heal themselves. She reversed 24 years of chronic lifestyle disease and lupus by healing the gut and building her immune system. Her first book, Wild Well, Dani's 6 Common Sense Steps to Radical Healing, is a national bestseller. She believes that your health is not rocket science and healing shouldn't be as well. So the great thing about Dani is that she talks as it is. She is just herself. She is just a personality that is just worth listening to. And we dive into a lot of great subjects during this podcast. We start off with everybody's favorite, which is sex. How to talk about sex with your patients. And we dive into this in significant detail, actually. She talks about how she talks about her patients about it, how she gets the CBD oil going and the candles and sexting and everything else. It was really a lot of fun to talk about that piece. We also talked about how in her practice, everything starts with the gut. So we talked about staying in your lane in this capacity as well, in the sense that she does know what she likes to do and what she's very good at, but then also refers out significantly depending on the situation. And with gut, she is a gut expert. And this is where she starts with her patients. So we spoke about the gut in detail. We spoke about health coaches and how she uses health coaches in her clinical practice, and how health coaches have transformed her clinical practice and helping people stay more compliant with what she's throwing out at them. Because Dani, as she says in the podcast, likes to vomit out the entirety of the information that her patients need. And then she has her health coaches that help her patients do it and actually make it work. Because as we know, as clinicians, it's very difficult for our patients to be compliant. And then you need lots of different steps along the way. We then transitioned to interestingly talking about trauma and how this is such a significant deal when it comes to healing. And we talked about ACE scoring and the history behind this, and how Dani's score is extremely high, and a lot of her patients have very high scores as well, and how this kind of dovetails into how she treats patients in clinical practice. We then transition over to talk about Dani's business. She is a business lady. She's a fantastic business lady. She has her own clinic. She just moved into a new clinic, a larger size, and she has her own supplement store. She talked about how she uses supplements in clinical practice, why it's so important that she has supplements in her office to help people right now when they're leaving her office so they have them along the way, and then how she's built that business. We also talked about multiple other things, including, Dani's 3 ways that you can live smarter, not harder. So she has great clinical pearls for clinicians that are listening here. I highly recommend this podcast. It was a fantastic one to record with her. If you like this podcast and you like some of the other ones that we've recorded, please don't forget to like and subscribe below. We love our podcast. We love our guests. We love doing this for all of you. Enjoy. All right, Dani, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, this is always a fun time when we get to chat. And I'm really excited to talk about your favorite topic, maybe for today, but maybe ever, which is sex.
Oh, you bet.
And when I was reading your book, the one thing that stood out to me was just the emphasis that you put on it. And I know, obviously, your patients aren't 18 to 25 years old that are having tons of sex without any issues, because that's what you do when you're 18 to 25, and then you get married, you don't have sex anymore. Anyway, there's all that. So wanted to talk to you about how you approach sex in clinical practice. I think that's where I want to go first, and then we can rock it from there.
I should have been like a sex therapist. I could have been Barbara Streisand from Meet the Fockers, right? And been a sex therapist. I'm as picky as her. And here I am, this family nurse practitioner who tries to get people heal their guts. And then it always turns into, how's your sex drive? How's your sex life? Are you having sex? What are you doing? It is so important. It's a huge piece of healing. And like you said, these 18 to 25-year-olds aren't having any problems. But the 58-year-olds like me who've got a dry vagina and no libido, and they went through menopause and their vagina's like rice paper, right? And they don't want anybody coming near them. And it's not even that. I see it with the youngers, like the ones who have young children, and they're exhausted, and it's huge. And I tell women every day, I've been divorced 21 years. I am single. But even when I could not stand my husband, I had a high libido, always did. It must be a Williamson thing. But I tell women every day, look, there are women out there, there are men and women out there who would give anything to have a partner at home, to have someone to have sex with. So we got to bring this back upstream like we do functional medicine, right? We always go back upstream. I wasn't born with lupus. My patients weren't born with Hashimoto's. Right. Let's go upstream. Did you ever have a good sex drive? Yeah, I had a great sex drive before I had kids. That's what I hear all the time, right? Or my husband's an asshole. Now that's a different issue, right? That's a totally different problem. And so then we got to fix that. Maybe you love him. Maybe you don't like him. There's a difference, right? Oftentimes I'm not a man. Sometimes I feel like a man. I feel like I've got bigger balls than most men, most of the time. But many men, I should say, not most men. I don't want that. Then you say, okay, well, what are we going to do here to fix this? But what I figured out is that we're busy. We're balls to the wall all day long, every day. No one makes time for, say, you and me right here. We don't talk eyeball to each other. We're raising these kids. We're putting the kids above everything else. And that is wrong. And if you did read my book, you know, I am biblical. And even though I talk a lot about sex, guess what? God loved sex. He wouldn't have created a clitoris if he didn't want us to have sex, right? There's one purpose for a clitoris: female pleasure, orgasm. My patients have never said to me, Dani, I wish I wouldn't have had an orgasm. That was the worst advice ever. So he wants us to be in union with our partners, right? And we've got to figure out, we've got to automate, eliminate, and delegate things in our life so that we can get our partners second. God first in my world over here. God first, partner second, children third. We've got it all screwed up, Scott.
Yeah. So when you start the conversation, because I think a lot of clinicians want to talk about it, like they have a lot of clinicians that are listening or maybe even people that are just want to talk to their doctors and say, like, how do you bring up these topics? I'm guessing you have a very specific way of doing it, which is just, frankly, just having that conversation. But what do you find is really
drive? I say that's 50 times a week. How's your sex drive?
Okay.
And they just, that's it. Non-existent. That's the word I get, non-existent. And then they're shocked because a lot of providers don't ask. Because what are they going to do if the patient says non-existent? I'm going to say, listen, there's lots of people who'd love to have somebody out there. So we got to figure out what's going on. I had a phenomenal sex therapist in this town. She was married to a preacher and she's a sex therapist. They were on Dr. Phil at one point for the odd couples. Wow. And she just died 2 months ago. And I am heartbroken because you got to have people in your toolbox. As providers, we can't do it all. Like, I'm not going to be counseling these people. And she would get these men and women back together. So I ask, and then I say, okay, what are we going to do? What do you have to automate, eliminate, and delegate? And out of your life. And I say, when do you want sex? Because I again, can't speak for a man, but if I had a partner and I sexted him right now and said, I am so horny, honey, I can't stand it, he would be home so fast with his pants off, right? And they're like, I like sex in the afternoon. I'm like, then Afternoon Delight, that's one of the best songs ever, right? Sing that song, say, come home, and he's going to come home. You've got to date your partner. You've got to go back to how it was. And before you got married, for many people.
Right. Or kids too. Yeah, too. Yeah.
And so I'm just real honest about it, is whatever it's going to take to get you and your spouse together. It doesn't have to be some long, drawn out thing. They think it has to be this long thing. It can be a quickie, a wham, bam, whatever, get in the shower, whatever. But sex starts in the kitchen before you ever leave for work in the morning. I tell them that every day. And they're like, yeah, we used to text each other, or we used to send each other little naughty pictures,
Messages.
little things, and we don't do it anymore. So oftentimes it's not that you don't have a sex drive, because let me tell you, somebody can light that fire in you. And it may not be your husband. And I tell people that every day. Somebody's willing to give him what you're not giving him. And I speak from experience. I had an affair, which I talk about in the book. And I wouldn't recommend that. I don't care what kind of marriage you're in. Don't have an affair. You may think you don't have a sex drive until somebody lights that fire. And we're walking. That is a fine line right there. If you want your marriage to work, and if we got to figure this out, and we've got to work together, and you have to be open enough to talk to your spouse. We're so clammed up, especially in the South. We don't talk about
especially
this
in Tennessee.
I know,
especially in Tennessee, right?
Keep your legs crossed until you are married, and then you're supposed to be a wildcat, starting on the honeymoon, and nobody's talked about it. I grew up in the church, and it didn't serve us. They don't talk about sex, and they don't talk about gut health and healing in the church.
Of course, right? So when you're talking about the sex life aspect of things, obviously you're going into a lot of the health related aspects to this. So what are your tricks of the trade if you're trying to help people? Of course, and we'll get to the functional stuff as well as the bigger stuff, the gut healing, inflammation, et cetera, because that's all a big part of it. But if you're talking about like the tricks of the trade of just trying to get people to start consummating their marriage over and over again, what are the things that you tell them? You talk about oil, you talk about candles,
all of that, but also no TV in the bedroom. The bedroom is for sleep and sex only. Get the TV, the computer, all of that out of there. That's got to be a sanctuary. Put the phone down. Stop fubbing instead of snubbing. They call it fubbing, right? Like this with the phone. Fubbing your husband and start effing your husband over there. Or
I haven't heard that. I like that. Okay.
And so all those little things, right? Get the kids taken care of. All it. Make room. Even if you have to schedule it. Guess what? You were on my calendar today. 4 p.m. It rang at 3:45 that I had an appointment with you. If you have to schedule sex, then schedule sex. That's fine. Who cares? There are seasons in everyone's marriage that do this. And if you want to stay married, then you and your partner have got to start dating each other again. And maybe you can't get out and go somewhere without the kids, but you got to find a way to keep it together. And then I get Dani, it hurts. I've got vaginal dryness. Okay. Everybody has CBD now. Most everyone has CBD. If you have a good quality one, not one you bought over at the Chevron station, like a good quality CBD, put it in your vagina. It is unbelievable for orgasms. Don't use KY or anything that's going to disrupt the microbiome in the vaginal tissue down there. Mm-hmm. Use a CBD. Clitoris to anus. That's all prime real estate down there. And then
just lather it up.
Just text him and say, honey, I've got something in my vagina. I need you to get in here. Give it about 10 minutes. This is how I talk to these patients.
I know you do.
You know that twice I've gotten flowers from husbands. Flowers. I'm like, that's great because I got no darn husband over here. So I'll take somebody else's husband's flowers. And they always say, thank you, Dani. Thank you. Because women just oftentimes won't talk about it. Again, we're overwhelmed. We're overworked. We're stressed out. Children cannot come first. I cannot state that enough. You were a couple, most likely. You definitely were a couple before you had children because it's the two of you. And they're going to grow up and leave, hopefully. I've got one room over there who's come back right now at 26, but they're going to leave and it's just going to be the two of you. And what are you going to do when they turn 18 or 19 and leave and you don't even know each other? You've never took time, right? And having an orgasm is great for inflammation, which inflammation is my entire practice, right? I wrote a whole book on inflammation, and nobody complains about good sex or good.
Orgasms are usually a good solution to most problems, right? That's what we'd say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it is a huge piece of healing. It's part of my common sense medicine. That I work on with patients, but vaginal dryness is a big deal. Menopause is a big deal. These are all things that need to be addressed. And if you're trying to talk to your healthcare provider and they're not listening, if this is for the lay person listening, or even the providers listening that are trying to figure out answers, then find a new provider. Our job is to help you.
I think, and as a provider, it's really important to remember that this is a big topic. It's a big part of health. It's a big part of having a good quality of life. And so if you're not having orgasms on a regular basis, your health is going to suffer compared to somebody that is having them kind of all the time, or even some of the time. So.
Absolutely. Having orgasms with a partner is phenomenal. But if you don't have a partner, then you can take care of that yourself and then be ready. Indeed. When you do find a partner.
Indeed. Yeah. And this is a window into how you work as a practitioner, Dani. And that's why I wanted to start there, because it's obviously fun. A lot of things we can talk about there.
And I'm fun. I'm a
know you are.
provider.
I know you are. So when it comes to looking at things, so you talked about inflammation, right? And you have a functional medicine practice. You've been doing this now for 10 years by yourself. Congratulations, by the way, 10-year anniversary.
This is my 10-year anniversary by myself. Yes, 5 years by yourself. Before that was somebody else.
Right, right. And so over the 10 years, you've seen a lot of people. You've worked with a lot of different types of demographics, I'm sure. What do you think from a clinical pearls perspective? That's what I wanted to hammer with you today, is like, from a clinical pearls perspective, what do you think are the main issues that you've been dealing with, of course, but also, pardon the interruption, this episode is brought to you by Transcriptions, makers of precision-dosed pharmaceutical grade formulas in the form of a buccal troche. For this episode, check out Blue Cannatine. Blue Cannatine is Dani's favorite Transcriptions product. This is a combination of caffeine, nicotine, CBD, and methylene blue. Dani uses it for focus, for drive, for flow, for productivity. And her son, who's in medical school, also uses it too. Dani uses it in clinical practice as well for her patients. Go to transcriptions.com and save 10% on your order by using code POD10 at checkout. Now back to the show. On the other side of which is, I think, a little bit more interesting, is like, how have you been able to do what you've done? What are some of the things that you just, this is like the secret sauce of Dani Williamson, other than your hair and your personality. And I think that's all part of it. That's beautiful and a big part of it. But as far as the clinical practice, like, let's go there and let's talk about, what do you think are some of those major things that you've been able to discover in your own way over the time and how that's transpired?
Okay, so here's how I've done it. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but it's worked for me. I've kept it very simple, and I stay in my lane. If I could say to any new provider for sure coming out, stay in your lane, find your niche or your niche, whatever you want to call it, right? Mine just happens to be Hashimoto's, but that's an inflammatory response, right? What causes that? So I keep it real simple. I focus on eat well, sleep well, move well, poop well, de-stress well, and commune well. And those are my 6 steps that I work with. And I tease that out with each new patient that walks in, right? It's like a 2-hour visit, hour and 45-minute visit.
Oh, wow.
With me. Yeah. And we tease that out. And I've already got a lot of information before they come, but I keep it real simple.
Sure.
And for me, the biggest trick, tip, pearl is I start with the gut. Because I personally spent 24 years seeing doctors, 4 colonoscopies before I was 40 years old, diagnosed with lupus, fibroids, irritable bowel, chronic itching, all before I was 35. No one, 10 doctors, 24 years, not one doctor until I was 44 years old ever leaned into me and said, Dani, what are you eating? Don't you know your diet controls your symptoms? Turned my entire world around 14 years ago. And that's where I start. I find a lot of providers don't. They start with all these other things. They do all this other testing, and that's all great and good. But I've learned if you don't heal the gut first, you're not going to heal anything else. And there's a reason nobody wants to start with it, because it's the hardest damn place to start. Right?
It is hard, yeah.
You tell a patient, I need you to eliminate. And I've had to learn how to word these things throughout the years. Yeah. When you say gluten, dairy, soy, corn, sugar, eggs, and peanuts are highly inflammatory, people just go blank, because that's all they eat. They don't think about the hundreds of other foods that were made for them that we don't eat. Nobody eats a rutabaga or a parsnip or goes and grabs a Jerusalem artichoke or whatever. I don't know. All these things, we're eating processed packaged food. So I start with that, and it's the hardest, and that's what I do for 5 weeks before they come.
How do you message it though? And so they don't get that glaze over their head? That's something that I deal with too, and a lot of practitioners that would listen. If you're going to have people eliminate all these things, like, what is your messaging there to not make them freak out and run out the door?
I give them my story as well, right? I feel better
sure.
at 58 than I ever felt at 38 or 28 or wherever they are in age. I've blurted out there, and I'm not going back to how I felt. And I tell them, look, this is baby steps. I'm going to detox you for 10 days. And I do a 10-day Mediterranean detox with them that literally is like detoxing for dummies. It's not this, but I hand them the booklet and it is broken down day 1 through 10. And I show them there's no guesswork. That's how I start.
Got it.
Right. And
so you make it very prescriptive.
You bet. Yeah. And then they transition to 21 days of just keeping out the top 7 inflammatory foods that I talked about. But they do it, even if they do it 50% what I need, because nobody's perfect. They feel so much better when they come back in. And on the very first visit, if I can get them to do it, but it's expensive, it's $400. I do a food sensitivity, food allergy test. I use Precision Point that looks at IgEs, IgGs, IG4, and complement. And so I'm looking at 4 pathways that are creating an inflammatory response. And I talk to them about it. And the ones that do it, then I tell them, look, you got 4 or 5 weeks here of hand holding, right? Of eliminating foods, adding all these new things in, sleeping better, pooping better, more energy, losing weight, most people. And then we're going to, when we come back for the follow-up visit, we're going to dive right into what for sure your body hates and what it loves. And I tell them, you've got all these foods you can eat. And it works for me. Maybe it's not perfect. There's a lot of controversy on food sensitivity testing. It changed my life 14 years ago when I realized eggs were killing me, a superfood, which eggs are the number 2 food allergy in the United States, by the way. So eggs were killing me. And I loved eggs because I was on food stamps all through nursing school. I lost everything. What's cheap? Eggs. I fed me and my kids tons of eggs. So people don't realize they could be eating an incredible food and it's hurting their body. And so I keep it, that it is simple. So it's real simple, Scott, but it's not easy. So we have a health coach. There's another pearl that I would give any provider who I sound like I'm from Gilbertsville, Kentucky, any of you that does not have a health coach, you need to hire you some.
Yes, ma'am.
Turned my business around, and I am in the market for 2 more coaches right now.
So tell me how that works. So how do you work with the health coaches? Do they just take over, or So they just take over after the first visit?
Take over. They don't take over, but people are overwhelmed, right? They come to a integrative provider. Nobody comes to you that feels good, by the way. Most of them have been to multiple providers, right? And they're overwhelmed and they get this books and books full of stuff, right? And they don't know where to start. And I've got one coach right now, like I said, we're looking for 2. And man, she's done it for years and she breaks it down for them and makes it more palatable. I'm more like a vomit all over you kind of person and give you everything because I get so excited about it. And Britt comes in and smooths it up. Just so happens my office manager and my nurse are both coaches as well. So they're coached to death and they don't even realize it until we get Britt involved. And it has really changed things for us for compliance because it doesn't matter how smart I am or how much I have it laid out. If their husband doesn't support them or their wife doesn't support them or their children, or they've got 4 kids under the age of 12 and that nobody's going to eat 1 ingredient Mediterranean style food, then it doesn't matter because it's what can they do? So we really try to break it down and make it simple for them and palatable for them so that they can do baby steps. And
so how often is the coach typically working with them? Is it something that you have the first visit and then you just have them on the phone with the health coach, or how do you typically structure it?
After that, and then I have the second visit as well because I like to have a lot of control. And if they want to hire, that sounded arrogant. I don't mean that. Not like a lot of control.
No, I know what you mean.
I want to see my patients, right?
Of course, yeah.
We have a coach that is very well priced, and they can hire them if they want. So that is what we hope that they do. I see.
So initially it becomes
yes. Right. I haven't figured out how to turn the reins over yet and let it just let them run it, which would be fantastic.
And probably at some level, at some point, you'll have to do that if as busy as you get,
Absolutely.
or maybe when your son comes in and he gets huge with everything.
Yes.
But
I'm telling you, coaches have changed that coach has changed my practice. And I think that is something that everyone needs to look into. We think it costs us money. It does not cost us money. It makes you money, which again, it's not about the money, but it is. This is a business, by the way.
Of course. Yeah, of course. So you have this first visit with your patient.
Yes.
You go through this, you vomit out everything that you want them to do.
Yes.
And then how does the health coach then take that and go with it until that second visit? Is it,
they go
on the phone with him?
They go with my plan and they follow up with them. Right. And she calls her and she calls in about 2 weeks after I see them and said, because if they're on board and started the 10-day detox, maybe they've started it, maybe they haven't, maybe they're in day 5 of it, who knows? And we've asked, and I have stepped out, and it's different for everybody, the plan. But I used to not type out a big plan for people, and now I do. And some things are copy and paste. I have a list a mile long of my favorite podcasts, and y'all are on there actually, but as well. So that's on there. Have you found your favorite podcast yet? Have you found your favorite influencers on Instagram? That I've got a list that I recommend that believe in my philosophy that the body is designed to heal itself. And I give them a whole list of books and blah, blah, blah. It just goes on and on. And then maybe they're not drinking water, so they've got to drink water. Maybe they got to change their tampons to organic tampons. So again, it's different for everyone. Maybe they've got a prescription to have sex with their partner for 30 days until they come back and see me. And gosh, my girls love that. They're like, oh gosh, I hate asking them. Nobody wants to talk about it but me. I'm the only one. I want everybody out there having it's 4:00 in the afternoon, and everybody should be having some afternoon.
Come on, if you're not listening to this podcast, or maybe while you're listening, I don't know, whatever. That'd be a little weird, but anyway. So
that's what they do is she steps in there and she calls 2 weeks after, and then if they want to hire, great. We got them on board, and we come back for the second visit. I go over their food sensitivity and I go over their labs. And what I've learned is if they'll do food sensitivity, fantastic, because that gives me a great foundation to go forward with. But I'm looking, whatever they're in there for, I'm doing a deep dive on those labs. I'm probably not doing a stool study on the first visit. I'm probably not even doing an adrenal test, like a saliva test, because again, you got to heal the gut. The gut, this affects the adrenals, affect the thyroid, affects the hormones. I'm doing a full dive on the thyroid because Hashimoto's is my focus. So I'm checking the thyroid antibodies and the thyroid peroxidase antibodies and T3, T4, reverse T3, TSH, all their hormones and all their nutrients. I'm probably not doing a NutriVal test on the first visit either. I just generally blood work, just regular blood work, and then food sensitivity. Now it depends. Some people have already had food sensitivity. So then we'll come into other specialty testing. But I think we tend to want, as integrative providers for sure, throw the whole sink at them. And I've learned this lesson through the years.
Yes.
They can't process it. They have no idea what we're talking about.
This is too much, right? So that's why you focus specifically on the gut when you start.
Yes.
Even though it seems like just one small part of the larger situation, it is the biggest part of a very large situation. So you start off with, when you're looking at the gut, you start off with food sensitivities, but you don't do a stool analysis. It sounds like that's maybe down the line some point. Really,
and I could do it on the first one. Yeah. Maybe they've already done food sensitivity. Maybe they come in telling me, look, I want that. And I said, okay, we'll do it. I'll throw the whole sink if they want it. This is expensive. And I've been a single mom for 22 years, and I am very conscious. It's expensive to see me. The whole thing is expensive. And then if I get supplements, so I'm very conscious of money. It's rare that I have someone who walks in and says, don't worry about it. Whatever you think I need to do, let's do it on the first visit and we'll tease it out.
Right. So you're just trying to triage what's most important as you're seeing the patient and deciding from there.
I've learned that through the years. Yeah. And if you really lean into your patients, this, you can tell if they are a deer in the headlights person sitting there within the first 10 minutes. And you're like, okay, I can't go.
Within the first 10 seconds, typically, right?
That's right. That's right.
10 minutes is, I would imagine it's much less than that for you, Dani, when you know somebody's going to be in there and looking at you like with the starry-eyed face and not knowing what they're going to do.
That's right. So then I know that, and it's fascinating to me that I'm not famous, but I have been in this town one of the longest. Dr. Hosse's been here longer than me, but I've been here a long time as a nurse practitioner doing what I do. And
Yeah.
it's unbelievable to me that sometimes people come in and they have no idea. Like they didn't know I had a book that was really successful. They don't know that I got a good Instagram, that I share a lot of stuff on there. Like I talk a lot about sex and thyroid and pelvic floor health and whatever. It could be anything.
Yeah,
Do you have
totally,
erectile dysfunction? Do you need some methylene blue? Do you need some nitric oxide? And they don't have any idea. So it's really interesting. So you can feel that out. You've really got to see where these people are and how committed they are to consistency and what's their family life like. And Scott, the first more than 5 years of doing this, I knew nothing about childhood trauma. So I have now, before coming into this, and I had a tremendous amount of childhood trauma. My ACE score is 6 and should have probably been a 7 or 8. Once I put that in my new patient paperwork, because we have a huge packet, I know going in that this patient who has Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or maybe has lost their thyroid, or has thyroid cancer, or who doesn't have a colon anymore, and their ACE score is a 6 or an 8, their trauma has manifested itself in their thyroid or their gut. Mine manifested in the gut. And so I know the body keeps score. Dani, you're going to have to back off, and we're going to have to see, has this patient worked on the trauma? My practice changed when I started addressing childhood trauma. It really did. My patients got better. They healed better when I found great trauma therapy.
Pardon the interruption. This episode is brought to you by Health Optimization Medicine and Practice Association. This is a nonprofit organization training practitioners how to optimize health rather than treat disease. For this episode, check out the metabolomics module. We actually have a cohort of students that are starting September 9th to learn the metabolomics module. Learn in small groups, virtual sessions each week, and learn from the Home Hope faculty directly. This is a fantastic module. It's foundational medicine, ladies and gentlemen. Go to homehope.org and save 10% on this order by using code podcast10 at checkout. Now back to the show. So that's what I was going to ask. So that's not something that you do at the office. That's something you will refer out for typically?
I refer out for, but I would love to have a good trauma therapist. Like I was telling you earlier, I have a pelvic floor therapist who starts Monday. Childhood trauma, molestation, lots of things. You hold that trauma in that pelvic floor. So she starts Monday with me, which is fantastic. So she does that kind of work where she's doing trauma therapy with pelvic floor work, or is that?
Wow,
she's a pelvic floor physical therapist, but she worked in trauma for years. So she's brilliant. Okay. Oh my word, she's brilliant. She's born and raised in India. She's also a yoga teacher. She knows what she's doing.
Okay, you should brought her a she can do yoga with you at night after you guys are done with office hours. So.
Tuesday nights we're starting yoga. I can't believe you just did that. We start yoga
of course.
Tuesday.
I know. You have your Sunday night sessions. You have your yoga. You have to get everybody in there having different things every day of the week. So there's no reason to ever leave Dani Williamson Incorporated.
Exactly right. Wild and well. No reason to leave. But if I had a trauma therapist in there, it would take it to the next level like a coach did. Yeah. But I know incredible trauma therapists in this town. And I am telling you, I worked on my body for years before I ever addressed the childhood trauma.
And nothing fixed it, right? Nothing could get you better.
Nothing fixed it completely. Yeah. And I would have never been able to care for my mom last year who died young, 78 with Alzheimer's, had I not done that trauma work years before. So I was able to care for a mom who never cared for me, quite frankly. And it takes your healing to the next level. So that's a little pearl that if as providers, you can learn some about adverse childhood experiences. It's not perfect. It's not a perfect thing, but it is a start with these patients because they've all got a history. We all have a history. Nobody ever asked me when I had my first colonoscopy at 20 for chronic diarrhea, and 4 more. Boom, after that, no gastroenterologist ever said, Dani, it's not normal to be pooping your pants all day, every day, and your stomach hurts consistently. What happened? Nobody.
Yeah. So if you could just briefly go over what the ACE test is, just for those that are listening that don't know that test, I think that'd be helpful.
The ACE test was from Kaiser Permanente and good Lord, I just went blank on his name. Oh, good Lord.
Are you going to curse at me?
What's that guy's? Oh, good Lord, I need some methylene blue. I went blank.
That's okay.
San Diego, California. He was a weight loss doctor. Dr. Folletti, Vincent Folletti. Good Lord, Dani.
You got it. I thought you were trying to curse at me, but that's okay. Okay.
Right? But I got it. I recalled it, man. I did for an old lady. Yeah. Pretty good. And He had a weight loss clinic, and these patients were losing hundreds of pounds. Do you know this whole history?
Not only sister, I know.
Hundreds of pounds in the 90s it was. And then they started dropping out of the program. These were college educated, mainly white, influential, upper middle class patients. And they started gaining even more weight than they lost. Like they weren't losing 20 pounds. This was 200 pound, 300 pound weight loss clinic over here, losing that kind of weight.
Wow. Okay.
Long story. It's a whole long story. But what he discovered, he brought some of these patients in who had gained this weight back. And a lady looked at him and he made a mistake. He said, "How old were you when you first had sex?" And he meant to say, he said, "How much did you weigh when you first had sex?" He meant to say, "How old were you?" And she said, 40 pounds. She weighed 40 pounds. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I meant how old were you?" She said, 4. "My father raped me my entire life." And it went on and on. He thought it was the only case of incest he'd ever had in his 20-something years of internal medicine practice. Come to find out, patient after patient had this trauma, some sort of trauma. Fast forward years and years, he and the CDC combined together with Kaiser Permanente, and they came up with a 10-question questionnaire. It's not perfect. It was given to white, upper middle class, college educated people. 60 to 70% of that population had an ACE score of 4 or above.
Wow.
Right?
And so 4 is like the cutoff typically, or what is the cutoff?
There's no real cutoff, but 4, if you have an ACE score of 4 or more, you have a 20-year shortened lifespan than a counterpart who does not. Mine is a 6. And I am not speaking that into my body, right? I am not living 20. I guess I should already be dead because 79 is the average age death here. It wasn't perfect. It didn't take into account foster kids, African-American, blacks, browns, any of that, uneducated. But so, if it's that prevalent in that population, imagine what it is across the board. And when I realized this and I learned about this, it changed my entire practice for me. Yeah. And it changed my life. And it's a piece, especially those of us in integrative medicine. That's integrating a whole nother part of this person. But you've got to have the time to dive into this. And those of us that practice functional medicine, we don't take insurance, the ones that don't. I have an hour and a half, 2 hours with that. I didn't when I was taking insurance and seeing 35 patients a day. I couldn't do that.
Of course not. Yeah. Yeah. I think even for those that are still within that model and don't have the capacity to speak for somebody for an hour and a half, to even be able to ask the question or even have a scoring system like that, that's something you could do really quickly.
That's exactly what you can do really quickly. And then you have, I had the books here, the resources. I've got a pile of books all over me here. I look like
the resources.
And then you have the books, right? The Body Keeps Score, the Dr. Gabor Mate, what's his book? I can't remember the name off the top, but there are beautiful books out there to help. And then you have your resources of trauma counselors. And so it takes it to a whole nother level. And Dr. Amy Appigian, as you probably know, is one of the leaders in the world now on trauma, the biology of trauma. So I have resources for patients that help that side of their healing. And then we get into the diet and the sleep. And you know what? And the sleep, right? Many people don't sleep at night. They don't sleep at night because guess what? They had trauma as a child and they couldn't sleep at night. They never knew when that trauma was going to happen. And if it was nighttime, like it was for me, because I was molested, you don't sleep. You don't sleep because you never know when that bear is going to walk through that door.
Right. Yeah. And this is something I tell new physicians that are just coming out of practice too. And I think it's so great we're talking about it because, as you said, we're integrative providers. Oftentimes people are going to be coming to us when they've already tried a whole bunch of other stuff. They've had all these other tests. They've seen conventional doctors. Nothing is helping them. And I can even think, I'm sure you've had this experience, but even twice this week, back to back with 2 patients that had come to me for hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Both of them wanted to get in hyperbaric chambers. I'm like, no, you don't need a hyperbaric chamber right now. You need to talk to somebody about what's going on. And I think people forget, there's one lady, and I think you'll resonate with this, is that she'd been healthy all her life and then got like a really bad viral pneumonia, blah, 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 super sick. And now she had a bunch of antibiotics. She was just done for 3 or 4 months. And now she can't get better. And now she just can't, she's just so stressed. And from the trauma of being sick, people forget that's a trauma in itself for a lot of people.
Wow.
So Yeah. So it's just something that I feel like when I first talk to somebody, I'm sure you can tell pretty quickly is that if you don't address the big elephant or bear in the room, there's no amount of supplements, of hyperbaric therapy, of methylene blue or whatever is going to help unless they're dealing with that side. So
You bet. You
I'm
can't out supplement a bad diet or bad trauma or a bad marriage or a bad job. You can't out supplement. You can't do it.
just can't do it. Yeah. So when I think about seeing these patients, it's such a big part of it. So when you added this in about 15 years ago. And so it's part of your initial paperwork. And so you will address it the first time or
Yes.
how do
Now,
you
I added it in only about 6 or 7 years ago. No,
Okay.
The first 5 years when I was in another clinic, I never even knew about it. I wasn't taught about any of this in school. And
None of us
what?
are. Yeah.
And I went to a great school. And so, no, I did not add it in until about 6 to 7 years ago. And that's when things started changing, man. I'm telling you, I have better outcomes now after I dive into that. And I already know their ACE score when they come into the office because it's in the new patient paper.
So will you wait? So will you wait with these patients to do the psychological work before you do start some of the physical stuff, or do you wait or do you do it in conjunction?
Yes, it depends on what. Some of these people come in at a 2 or 3 and they're like, man, I've already done years and years of trauma. I've had 9s and 10s who were just come to me a week after they got out of the inpatient hospital, psych hospital and stuff, but yet they had never been talked to about the childhood trauma. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So it depends. Yeah. It's individual, which is personalized medicine, right?
Of course.
I know, I don't know everything, but I know how to lean in or back out of that and say, we're going to talk about this later on. Let's work on this. And I want you to look up Dr. Apigian, or I want you to read the Body Keeps score for me. And so again, it's different, but many people who come to me they have some concept that their childhood has set them up for a lifetime of chronic diseases. And one thing that I tell them is, look, you were born healthy, and I am living proof if you were born healthy, you do not have to live sick. So we're going to start teasing it out right now. This is a marathon. The first 40-something years may have been rough, but the next 50 years are going to be much better. One day at a time, we're going to start teasing this out. You're going to feel so much better in 6 months. You're not going to be where you need to be, probably.
Yeah.
But you're better. You're better.
Yeah. And actually, that's a good point too, is that a lot of patients, they come to me and they want to feel better like tomorrow.
Yeah.
And because that's what the American way is, they think that there's a pill for something that they can just take and that tomorrow they're going to feel better. How do you counsel people and let them know that it's going to be a process, right? Because I think in keeping them along for the ride, certainly some of our products, the ones that we created at Transcriptions, like our methylene blue products and our Calm and our Z, have been set up that way where they're not the solution for the long term, but they're the solution now, we hope, to get people through some of that rough stuff. Do you have some go-tos that you use, maybe some of our stuff or other things that you use that kind of help people along that path?
Yes, we have every bit of your stuff in there that we use for sure.
Yeah.
The Calm and the Z and the methylene blue, again, depending on what they've got going on. But I use a tremendous amount of magnesium, which I think it doesn't fix anything probably, but it absolutely helps people get through the sleep or the restlessness or the anxiety. I use a lot of magnesium and GABA and theanine because I have a lot of anxious patients in there. I was trying to think of what else we use a ton of.
Sure, it's also personalized, right? As far as what people are coming in for,
right?
Because tons of people have anxiety.
It's a heavy dose of omegas. Some people it's a heavy dose of magnesium. Some people you just need some CBD in your orally, vaginally, topically.
Every orifice possible.
Yeah, just go have some sex. I don't. I do say that, but I don't say that like in seriousness. It's going to fix everything. But I do. I bring in a lot of things, and I do own a supplement store, right? So
yeah.
So I tell them, look, here's one thing that I have them bring their supplements to their first visit. Some of them forget. Some of them, I wish I hadn't have done that because it's literally a wagon full of them. Again, trying to out supplement whatever's going on. And so I try to use everything that they have up there. But as a provider too, if you have a supplement store or or you sell supplement. That's a great, what's the word? Not asset. It's a great adjunct to your business, right?
Let's talk about that, because I think my father's a chiropractor. I've been a chiropractor for 40 years, and he's been selling supplements in his office the whole time. And I think that there are significant benefits to having what you want people to take there with you. So why don't you talk about that a little bit? Because that's probably a big part.
I started with one shelf of supplements in my store in my office 10 years ago. One shelf. Mm-hmm. Brought in some supplements. Y'all weren't around, or I didn't know about you.
No, we weren't there.
Yeah, so you weren't there. So some Metagenic, some Pneumatic. I had some,
sure.
Some Zymogen, right? Look, a few things. Now I have a full standalone, separate LLC, Wild and Wellness Emporium store that people come from all over. It's not just my patients, right?
Right.
And the way I talk to patients about this is, look, I sell high quality things, nutraceuticals. We sell every product you all make. We sell all the good stuff. I know what you're getting. You can, and I understand you buy your supplements on Amazon. So that we could have a whole show talking about So it's about educating. I'm sure your dad has, right? There's no quality control. Please don't buy it on Amazon. You don't have to buy it from me, because that's a fine line, right? So now I've separated out the businesses, Wild and Clinic, Wild and Well Supplement Emporium. So 2 separate LLCs there. It's a fine line. You don't ever want to be seen as somebody who's pushing a lot of supplements for you.
Right. But at the same time, like as you said, you've created it in your image. This is your store,
right? And
you have your cult of personality to some degree. People love what you do, and they trust you because you've also had a track record too. It's not like you just put up your shingle a year ago and now have a huge supplement store. You've been you've been doing this, and rubber hits the road for a long time.
Rubber hits the road, testing it out, trying it out, making mistakes, having to clearance it out, whatever. But my business changed supplement wise too when I started private labeling things. And your dad may know that. That
he does.
That really helped. And patients like that because they love, trust, and like you. Love, trust, I don't know, whatever. Like
those
you.
Things.
And so they want what you recommend and what you think. And it's about integrity. So this is a pearl to providers. What we do, there has to be so much integrity in our business model because our patients are desperate. They will buy anything. And our customers, so now I have a store, right? And I have a clinic, and I train the employees in my store. You better have integrity, and I better never, ever overhear you trying to sell the kitchen sink to somebody who comes in and is desperate, because they are desperate. People don't come to integrative providers as a rule that feel well. And when they come into a supplement store and you don't know these people and they've got all these chronic Lyme disease, say, or heavy metals or long COVID, they would spend $1,000 if you told them, and they would take their clothes off and walk through the store naked. Literally, if you said it was going to help them feel better. So you better practice with integrity and realize that you can't out supplement a bad life, bad diet, stress, and all that. And so that is key to me. Because if it's not about the money will come, we'll make a great living. We will make a fantastic living if you do right by the patient or the customer. They'll come back for more. And maybe I think, good Lord, they probably need 10 things, but there's no way. They're not going to do it. They're going to shut down. So you figure out what's the biggest, what's going to give them the most bang for the buck. Is it going to be some methylene blue or some Trozy at night, right? Is it going to be a high dose of magnesium at bedtime?
Right.
Most likely.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So a question on the private label, just to hammer that in a little bit. Tell me a little bit. So this is you're putting your name on the label. So it gives them the name recognition. Then you felt that was very important.
It was very important to me. And I got started in that about 8 or 9 years ago, like right after I opened the clinic. I started with just a few things, my best sellers. And then come to find out, that was a very smart move on Dani Williamson's part, because then everybody started selling on Amazon. And you could get all this on Amazon. And again, there's no quality control on there.
Zero. Yeah.
So if it has your name on it, some of the patients know that it's a Metagenics product, right? Because they used it before it said Dani Williamson or Wild on it. But most of them don't know that. And I think that's so important. But I'm very honest about it. I'm like, we private label it. I don't manufacture anything. I do not. Right. I think you will lose your tail as a little person trying to manufacture something that you've got to buy $60,000 worth of. What?
Yeah. No,
And we
I
don't.
don't
So
recommend that.
I'm
No.
not going to recreate the wheel over here. So I will private label, white label, whatever you want to call it, which most people do. And
Right.
I think that it shows brand loyalty. They like, love, and trust you, and they want what you recommend. And
Right. That makes sense.
so it works for us. And then I also share a tremendous amount online on social media. I do tons of videos. You know this, little quick videos with me drinking my magnesium 3-8, at night and stirring it up and showing them and stuff. And I think those that build, again,
trust. It builds trust. It brings and your brand on that case,
it is,
right? But
and it's built into your brand, and it is a brand. It's a Wild and Well brand for me. It would be something totally different for you, something totally different for Dr. Ted. Blah blah blah.
Everybody,
yes, right. But if you yes. Yeah.
So I didn't mean to interrupt, but I was also thinking this. There's a big push recently for some basically having your entire supplement platform be online. So you have your patient, you see them, and you prescribe them supplements online instead of seeing them and having them in person, right? My dog is coming to say hello for a minute there. But so do you think that there is a benefit to having the supplements with you in the office compared to going online and going to FullScript? I like FullScript a lot, and we have a lot of friends there, and I think it's a great platform. But do you think there's a benefit to having things in the office with you as opposed to just online?
Absolutely. So let me tell you, I started off online because, and I had a little bit in the office, but I also had no revenue. Like I didn't have any discretionary income back then. I was still paying off $200,000 in student loans when I opened that clinic at 48 years old. So yes, I had it online at first because I didn't have to put the cash flow into it. And then as I grew, now I do my own shipping. So I have an online app, Shopify, right? I use Shopify, but I have my own store on Shopify, and we ship out of our store now, out of our office. Oh. You've met Britt.
Yes.
Britt is, so that was the best hire there on that. So that I brought in after probably 7 years. It'll be 3 years in November. We launched our online store. But up until then, 7 years, I was with Carewell. So Carewell shipped and fulfilled everything for me. And I think that's a great way to start, right? You don't make you make a tiny bit, a fraction, but they handle all the expense, right? And then as you grow, bring in things to your personal store. And then if you can, at some point, it would behoove you to ship it yourself, which is a whole nother learning curve. But you get to keep the profit, but of course it also costs a lot of money. People have no idea how much it costs.
So do you actually ship everything do you have a warehouse right there?
Yes, we now have it at our store. We had it at the other place, but it was chaos in there. So now we have a dedicated shipping department. I can't wait for you to see it. It's small,
my goodness,
but we've shipped to all 50 states.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is.
So now, because I know you've just moved offices, right? You've just expanded.
Just last week.
That's a big part of this, right? Yeah, yes. Because you're increasing the size of your supplement store too, right?
Tremendously, but I've done it slowly. I am just a believer that don't spend money unless it's going to make you money, and you need to set big goals. And we met our big goal last year, and I've set a bigger one this year. We'll see. I don't know if we'll hit it, but we might.
It's amazing.
And again, it's just, you got to work this like a business because it is a business. And you got to I don't know how to say this. You got to have a personality. I'm serious.
You got to be you, right? You have to figure out a way to make it.
You can't be anyone else.
Right.
And I am who I am. I am not for everyone. I know that. Because if you are a fragile, weak flower, we won't jive, right? I will overwhelm you. And I know that. And I am good at stepping back. But I'm also I know what it's like to be sick, Scott. I know what it's like to be sick. And I know what it's like to be well. And sometimes the wounded warrior, the wounded healer, we can be very efficient because I want everyone to feel better. And so again, keep it simple. The supplement situation is important, but I also believe that as providers and new providers, let me tell you, you got to walk the walk. I'm not eating. I follow my food sensitivity. I do eat well. I sleep well. I poop like a goose. I move well. I work on stress. Stress is through the roof with me. And I've got a great community. And if I had a partner, I'd be having lots of sex, but I don't have one. But you've got to walk the walk. And if they see you out at the pizza place and you're eating all the pizza and all the fried wings and all that, then I'm sorry.
It's like that vegan influencer who gets caught eating chicken at like the local restaurant or something like that.
Exactly right. And 15 years ago, Dr. Dan Cowd, my mentor, I got my food sensitivity results back. There were 29 foods on there, everything I love. And eggs were number 1 and dairy was number 2 and cashews were number 3. I said, I'm not doing this. I threw it on the floor. It was the week before Thanksgiving. He said, if you're going to work here and you're asking your patients to follow these same results, then you're going to walk the walk, Dani. And I was like,
I love it.
Oh, I'd only been there like 3 months and had even more student loans at that point. And okay. And I did it. So that's a big pearl. And I don't think they teach that in medical school.
No, I mean, you have your
walk. You can't be drinking a Diet Coke or having a Chick-fil-A bag. No,
or drinking vodka out of that glass of yours right there. That's not vodka.
It's moonshine. I'm from Kentucky. So.
Dani, this has been great. I really appreciate you spending some time with us. I love your perspective. I love that, like, you're a rubber hits the road, get shit done kind of lady, but also knows how to run a business, right? You're running a business and helping so many people, like, because you know how to run a business too, which I think is really important for clinicians to listen to. So I have one more question for you. It's going to be through my dog barking, and that's okay, everybody. Just a dog. He's just happy. Okay. And so this is the question. And we've already thrown around all these things today. The question we ask at the end of the podcast always is, what are 3 things that you can tell people that are listening, 3 ways to live smarter, not harder? Smarter, Not Harder is the name of the podcast. So we like to end with 3 pearls. We've talked about so many this time. You can even just rehash 3 things that anybody can do to live smarter, not harder.
I can tell you right now, and I wrote a whole part of it in the de-stress chapter. Okay, I didn't realize we were doing this. AED your life. Automate, eliminate, and delegate everything you can out of your life. Right? Automate whatever you can. I don't care what you got to do, your groceries, your bills, whatever. Automate it all. Even sex, right? Automate it. Put it on automate every however many days. It's on your phone. Eliminate the soul suckers out of your life, right? Eliminate, if you're in a bad job, get out of it. Eliminate the things that you don't want to do. If I didn't want to do this, I wouldn't have done it today. Nothing gets on your calendar unless you put it on there. And delegate. AED. Those are 3 things, man. And that'll bring you back to life, right? If you fall off the treadmill at the gym. So that's how I would live. Smarter, not harder, right there is AED your life. But I want to say one more thing. I know I got a lot of words. I was voted most talkative 1984 at Marshall County High School. That's why that book is a big fat book. But this is a business for the practitioners that are listening, for the people who, if you own a business or if you're thinking about getting in a business or own a clinic, it is a business. We want to give it all away. And I do, because we are providers. You can get people who take insurance and they're stressed and all, and they're worried about going to a direct pay practice like I have. You can charge what you're worth. Trust me, they'll show up. And you may need to raise your prices, but they will show up. But then you've got the extra money to help the people who can't afford it. And it's a business, and you've got to run this. Even though we are health care providers, this is not charity. I have learned if you give it all away, there's no skin in the game, and they're not going to do it. There's no commitment, right? But this is a business. And if you don't know how to run a business, then you have to hire someone who knows how to run a business. And you got to stay on top of it, though, because doctors, I don't know about nurse practitioners, but doctors are famous for letting someone run their business in the ground. Am I right?
You're totally right. I was just on mute because of my dog barking, but that's beautiful. And thank you for saying it, because most doctors don't understand. And I'm guilty of this too. And I'm still working on this. I'm a recovering hospital doctor, not knowing that it's difficult to raise your prices and to know that you are worth more than you think you are. Because if you're helping so many people, like you said, you can help others who can't afford it because you have the money in the system to be able to do that.
That's exactly right. And I learned that when I raised my prices. And anybody who's listening, honestly, if you ever wanted to reach out, I am no guru over here, but I do understand how to run a business and how to make it work and how to keep it simple. Just keep it
Hustling.
simple.
Yeah.
I would
I
be
love it.
glad to help you.
Yeah. So Dani, if people want to learn more about you, where should they go? Where can they find more about you and your book and everything else?
DaniWilliamson.com. Everything you need to know right there. The book's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. It's everywhere. And then Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok is all the same. Dani Williamson Wellness.
I love it. So it's okay to buy books on Amazon, but
you
not
can
your
buy
supplements,
books on
right?
Amazon. You can buy toilet paper on Amazon. You can buy your light bulbs on Amazon. I don't care. You can buy my
Just
book.
no
I
supplements.
guarantee you it's my book. There's nothing fake in it. Don't buy anything you're going to ingest on Amazon. Now, I would prefer you go to your local bookstore and you say,
ma'am. Yeah.
hey, I want that book by that nurse practitioner that was #1 on thyroid health. That wasn't #1 on all of Amazon. Support local. Always shop local because you're feeding the community then when you shop local.
Yeah. Dani, thanks so much for being here. I look forward to seeing you again in person again to talk more, but I really appreciate you spending the time with us today.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
See you next time. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Smarter, Not Harder podcast, where we give you 1 cent solutions to $64,000 questions. And this episode was no exception. It was so fantastic to speak to Dani Williamson. Dani is just an amazing human. She's hysterical, and she's just a personality who's such a great clinician with so many clinical pearls that she was able to share with all of us today. If you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe below, and we'll see you next time.